We're going to talk about veterans and people who have been deployed.
Yeah.
And you, as a counselor, what do you see? So, I'll set this up by saying people that are in the military, it's very fragmented because you see, okay, there they are, and then they go off somewhere to Iraq or wherever they're going, and then you don't even think about it very much until they come back.
Mhm.
And then you think, oh, they've come back and now they can go back to their life. But wait a minute, there's more to it than that because based on what probably happened to them while they were gone could have a
Yeah.
profound effect. And like I think I mentioned to you before, I mean, I had heard about PTSD and I'd heard about, all kinds of tragedies and violence and stuff. And when I lived in Honolulu, I think I told you my neighbor who killed himself. This guy right next door, 50 feet away from, because the houses are very close together. And his wife comes running over to our house. It's like, and see, all of this ties together. It was September 11th,
Oh,
2015 is when it happened. Okay. So then, and we had seen, they were neighbors, so you see them, and they were nice. The woman was especially nice, and then guy, he'd wave and smile or whatever. But I remember leading up to that, about a month before that, an ambulance pulled up, and I thought, oh, his mother-in-law, because the wife's mother lived there. Maybe she's ill or something. But then I saw him in a wheelchair, and I said, well, that's kind of odd, Didn't think too much of it. Then another time, I'm about to walk into our house, and our garages are very close together, and I heard somebody just swearing, and it was him. And I was going, what was he swearing at? It was nobody in the garage. He was just talking, swearing. And I said, that's kind of odd. Then about a month later, she comes running over, banging on the door, like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She says, my husband's shot himself in the head. Would you and my wife come over and make sure he's dead? So we had
oh,
to we had to go over, and sure enough, in the bathroom, he's laying on the bathroom floor with a bullet wound in his head. And later on, we find out, oh, he's done 3 tours of Iraq. He lost
mhm.
a lot of men there. He had a
Yeah.
drinking problem. He
Oh,
went
wow.
off. He went off his meds. He would disappear for days on end. And then we looked in the backyard, and there was a big, maybe 5 foot high stack of empty 12-pack cases. Like when you get rid of the beer, you can kind of stack it up. So this guy, I had no idea. So I'll shut up about that, and maybe you can just tell me about, what. Maybe you can start off by some of the clients or people
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you see that you work.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, rest in peace. I mean, that sounds
Yeah.
absolutely terrible, and it kind of goes to show you. And I've been working with veterans since I started in counseling 9 years ago. I'm also a veteran myself, so and I understand like trauma it affects people in very unique ways, but a couple things that we look at from just not only someone who's served but also from a clinical viewpoint is what does their support group look like first and foremost. When you come back from deployment or you come back from the field, typically you have to get evaluated, you have to get checked. So they do like what they call like a post deployment screening. And depending on the command, depending on, how serious they take mental health in the service members unit, they will set someone aside and try to screen, see a psychologist, make sure they're okay. If there are like blatant red flags, now that comes down to a good command team, right? You got to have a good command team, but a lot of times, especially depending on the different rates, whether it's Navy or MOS, whether it's Army, so military occupational specialty, in the Navy, it's rate. Marine Corps, it's MOS as well. So whatever the jargon is, their job, depending on the job and the unit, that can play a huge role on how PTSD is diagnosed, right? So I was reading some numbers, and I sent you these numbers in text a few minutes ago. The numbers from service members who are diagnosed jumps up once they access VA care. So it actually goes up to 24% from 13% overall. And we see that because they have access to service and they're focused on getting treatment. Now, that transition period between deployment and discharge, that is an absolute vital part of a service member's life, because without a healthy, successful transition, especially if they are exhibiting signs of PTSD, they might lose that connection, right? I've worked with many clients who take 5, 10, 15 years to file claims because they just don't have that encouragement from their command team. They don't have that encouragement from their family, their friends. They don't understand the necessity of filing claims. And depending on where you're out processing, they might not even give you a chance to file the claims in time. So, it really depends on the op tempo of the unit and the command culture and command climate of the unit that influences how someone adjusts to civilian life, right? A lot of times, especially during the GWAT era, you get these overly enthusiastic leaders who just want everybody on deck. Like, oh, well, you can't discharge, you can't get out. We still need you in the fight. And it's like, if someone's done, they're done, right? That happened to me when I was getting out. They told me straight up, they said, Swann, you're not going to be able to get a job on the outside. What are you getting out for? They do this all the time, all this gaslighting, and it doesn't help the cause, right? The culture has to shift towards helping the service member transition out to civilian sector, right? So that's what I see. I see a lack of transition assistance with a lot of the veterans that I work with. And also, I'm seeing a lot of the signs, right? You go from this unit where you're around the same people every day for years, right? The average Navy contract, I think, is about 5 years. Army, it's 4 years. Marine Corps, it's 5 years. Air Force, I think it's the same thing, right? You're around people 4 or 5 years minimum. If you're doing your whole contract, you don't get kicked out. You go from that, seeing the same people every day. Now you're out of uniform and you have to figure out your own life anyway. Add into, oh, you've been deployed, you've been to war, this, that, and the third. You've been exposed to military sexual trauma. I read a statistic, I believe, what I read somewhere around at least 6% of all women in the military suffer from military sexual trauma at some point in their careers, which is entirely too high. One is too much. 6% is atrocious, and it's way more than civilian realm, right? So if you're exposed to these things and then you go out, okay, you got to be out on your own now. You take off the uniform. People experience social withdrawal. They don't want to go outside. They don't want to connect. That's one of the first things that I look for when I'm dealing with someone with PTSD. How much are you connecting to positive environments? How much are you connecting to exercise, connecting with friends and family? Um, Healthy coping mechanisms to deal with the trauma. Are you going to therapy? Have you tried therapy before? Are you doing any, bottom up therapies like EMDR? Are you doing any meditation, any yoga? Are you doing any community service? What's your substance abuse look like? What's your exposure to family looking like? Are you avoiding family? Are you avoiding friends? Are you not going out and doing things on a regular basis? That, to me, that's the big red flag right there. If I see someone who's discharged and they're just not able to, have a social life, that's something that I really emphasize when I'm working with veterans that are dealing with PTSD, right? Also, we want to check in on their experience with the mental health system in the military. Typically, the military mental health system is very mission focused, meaning that their job is to try and get you back into the fight, right? So they may not always have the best interest of the veteran in mind, which can be very frustrating for the service member who's still in, right? Okay, you've thrown me around these deployments. I'm getting cancels. I'm getting this. They're not giving me what I need. Any kind of experimental treatments like psychedelics, ketamine, TMS, things like that. That's all out the window. You don't get that in the military. Substances are not legal. You can't even use marijuana in the military. So, any type of substance other than SSRIs and, the conventional medications, you're not going to get that in the military. And some bases don't even have military support. There are some jobs like submariners, nuclear people, they cannot be on certain medications for psychiatric because it can violate their ability to do their job. So a lot of those guys are hesitant to go to mental health. Same with folks like pilots, special forces, anything that requires a top secret clearance. These guys are always, feeling like their careers are at jeopardy. So the military creates a very insular culture that is very much focused on the mission, but not necessarily on the individual, which is what I see in my practice when I get clients. They come to me and they're like, what do I do about this? What do I do? And the first thing I think about, if you're not connecting to society, to life outside of the military, and you're just kind of focused on your job, oh, I want to be a good captain. I want to be a good warrant officer. I want to be a good NCO, whatever. I want to support my guys, but you're not supporting yourself. That's one of the first things. Also, what I look for is, are they using the amenities at their base, right? A lot of bases, believe it or not, do have some great supplemental services to complement one-on-one therapy, right? So they have group support, they have yoga, they have meditation on base. Every unit has access to a chaplain that you should be able to access whenever. So there are amenities, but a lot of times there's a lot of stigma around accessing these. Oh, what do you mean you're going to yoga class? Like, that's soft. Why don't you just go lift weights with us? Why don't you just go and drink beers with us on the weekends, right? You get that peer pressure from the other guys in your unit, and it's like all of a sudden that yoga class, that group therapy, that meditation class, that talk with the chaplain doesn't seem as cool because now you've got peer pressure. You're trying to keep up with everybody. You don't want to be embarrassed or be seen as weak because you have something going on. So there's a lot of things to think about with that. When I was in the military, I went to group therapy and it was very beneficial. They did a great job at Fort Bragg down there at Womack, and I would encourage any service member to access the amenities that they have on base already there for them. Talk to the commander, go to your first line, and then talk to your commander. If your first line isn't listening, most commanders have an open door policy, so you can talk to the guy in charge and say, hey, I'm not doing so well, I need to talk to somebody. But that's easier said than done. So they get to me because they feel like they can't access those things. They can't access the amenities on base because they feel like there's an agenda against them, which sometimes it can feel that way, you know, especially depending on the job and the unit. So that's kind of what I see. There's this systemic oppression that a service member has to work through in order to get help with their PTSD symptoms. There's a lot of stigma around not being mentally well in the military that they have to work through, and that's one of the biggest obstacles, more so than coming to therapy, almost more so than coming to therapy and getting the treatment. So
Well, you answered about five questions just in that, which is great. It makes my job easier because what one question I was going to ask you was if there were differences between how men and women view themselves when PTSD is involved. And the kind of the second part of that question was, men have kind of a reputation as of being, well, I don't need any counseling. I shouldn't be feeling like I need any counseling. So I'm just wondering, well, it's a two-part question. First, you could answer the thing about the men and the women. Are
yeah,
women like more likely to go to counseling and deal with the PTSD, and are men going to try and tough it out?
I would say from what I've seen working with veterans over the last 9 years, it's kind of an even split in a lot of ways. A lot more men are coming to counseling than people would think. The problem is that even if you come to counseling, you kind of have to suspend some of the, you got to work through some of that ingrained indoctrination, for lack of a better word, that the military brings you. Right? You're a man. You're in the unit. You're supposed to be tough. You're supposed to be this. Supposed to be that. With women, I find it a lot easier to kind of break through that. Right? Once the uniform is off, it's off. Right? And even if you're still in, you got to take that off. You got to be able to step away from being the guy. I can always tell if someone shows up to session in uniform, it's going to be a little bit more just tension and formality. And if you can just take that off and put some civilian clothes on and just talk to me like a person, right? Because again, you've got that systemic oppression of the military hierarchy to deal with. And I feel like because there are way more men serving in the military than women, uh, there's this patriarchal just structure that men have to abide by, to kind of, oh, I'm the man, I'm strong, I'm in charge. And that makes it very hard to really break through. I mean, that's probably one of the first things that we have to do is like start to unburden ourselves of that, and strip away some of those labels, right? When you're talking to me in session, you're not a captain, you're not a commander, you're just you. You're just a human being. You gotta be able to take those bars and those stars and those stripes off so we can be human beings and talk to each other. And I find that, most of the time women, from what I've seen, what I've worked with, they're a lot easier to just kind of talk on a more human level, right? Like men focus on procedure, they focus on the military hierarchy, the process, whereas women they focus on, from what I've seen, they focus on the things that lead them to be in session, the incidents that they're dealing with, whether it's sexual trauma or frustration with work, frustration with their past. A lot of women that I've worked with, they come from a traumatic past, where it's there's a lot of issues around like father figures, and that plays into how they interact with the military. And also being that they're in the minority, like the extreme minority, of people who served, it's hard to find a sense of identity, right? Like you're putting on these fatigues that weren't made for you, first and foremost. You're going into units that are male egocentric, and you're trying to carve your niche into these male dominated fields, and it can be very isolating for them. So that's one of the things that I like to focus on is, okay, what is your identity outside of the uniform, right? Because that to me is what brings balance not only to women but also to men. If you get off work and you can go and do what you want to do, that has nothing to do with the military. If you can go to music shows, if you can, work on your hobbies, work on painting, work on yoga, work on exercise, playing with your dogs, things like that. If you can connect to those things, then it becomes a lot easier to find balance and in turn help to manage some of these traumatic symptoms, right? If you come home from work and you're sitting in front of Netflix and you got a 12 pack in your hand and you're just waiting until that 12 pack disappears and then you go to bed and you do the same thing over and over again, then those traumatic symptoms are going to perpetuate over and over and over, right? More than likely, right? There's never been a time in my counseling career where I've recommended a client go home and down a 12 pack of Coors Light and watch their favorite show. That's just not how we cope effectively and in a healthy manner with traumatic symptoms, right? So avoiding those trauma loops, getting out there, going to therapy, going to group counseling, participating in healthy activities, getting medication if needed. There's a lot of medications out there that are effective for managing the symptoms around PTSD, like SSRIs and SSNRIs or SNRIs and things like that. Um, that can be prescribed by a qualified professional that people need to really think about connecting to, right? So having that combination of medication and psychotherapy and having group support out there's so many veterans groups out there. One of my favorite groups, actually, they're a jiu-jitsu group. They're called We Defy, and what they do, they provide free jiu-jitsu scholarships for veterans experiencing things like PTSD, right? So you can go get a scholarship from them and train jiu-jitsu for a year for free to help find that camaraderie that you're missing from the military, to help process trauma physically. There's a lot of studies out there that show that somatic work is very helpful and effective to treat PTSD. So getting out there, connecting with other people, having physical contact with other people in a way that's safe, in a way that's helpful. That there's also groups that help connect veterans to nature, hiking, hunting, things like that. There's all kinds of groups out there that I recommend clients to connect to help process their trauma in a way that makes it a little bit more approachable, right? Because people come in to counseling sometimes and there's so much going on, they don't know where to begin. So finding something positive to connect to, I always want to try to get clients into that mindset when I'm working with them on their trauma. So, but yeah, I mean that's kind of the nutshell of what I look for when I'm working with the clients. There's a lot more to it. I mean, there's so many different therapies and treatments. Cognitive processing therapy is one that I like, where you can just kind of work through and challenge some of those negative thoughts about trauma, and help kind of bring out the client's strengths and how they process and handle it. There's all kinds of, like I said, there's experimental therapies out there. CBTI is a tried and true cognitive behavioral therapy. And then again, the experimental therapy, so psychedelic therapy, things like that. There's been some research in the federal system on the effectiveness of it. I think Colorado was one of the first states to really push for psychedelic treatment for PTSD. Um, and a lot of service members, they'll even get like service dogs, things like that. Now, obviously, that's going to take a lot more assessment to make sure you can take care of a dog and make sure they thrive with you. But there's all kinds of treatments, and I start out with the talk therapy. I feel like after a few months, if we're not seeing any movement in the numbers, then usually I'll refer them to what we call more like top down therapy, like EMDR, or things like that, TMS, transmagnetic stimulation, and then of course the psychedelic therapy, things like that. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I do it. That's how I see it. If I see movement over the first couple of months to where their numbers are going down, there's less nightmares, decreased suicidal ideation, decreased withdrawal, they're connecting to hobbies, connecting to family after the first few months, then I know that the talk therapy is going the way it needs to go, and we don't have to go into those more advanced therapies, or even just complementary therapies, right? You can do EMDR and do talk therapy as well. I've seen that happen as well. So
Well, you mentioned family and you mentioned support systems. And when I was living in Hawaii, there were several families that we got to know. Well, actually, who we got to know were
yeah,
usually the female spouses of men who were deployed. And in some cases, they were deployed for 6 months, 8 months, a year, and they couldn't have very much contact with them either. I mean, they could maybe talk twice a month or something. So, what kind of strain does that put on both people involved, the spouse and the person that's deployed?
I feel like it depends on how much time the couple has under the belt, right? How many tours, right? I mean, generally speaking, from what I see, people who are first or second tour, they're more stressed out about it than someone who's had, 3, 4, 5 tours. Um, but That can change. It depends on how bad the tour is too, right? If you're overseas and things are just going poorly with your unit, you got multiple casualties, that can ramp up the traumatic symptoms, right? Um, Generally speaking, it's something that I feel like needs to be spoken about more with service members, especially ones that are married. Like, hey, you're going to have some challenging times. It might be a good idea to get some pre deployment counseling from either the chaplain or a marriage counselor in town, just so you guys can create tools for each other to stay connected. Right? A lot of folks, they'll send care packages. A lot of folks, they'll text. I've never had a client in 9 years have an issue communicating with their spouse overseas. Um, I know it happens, but generally speaking, most command teams want you to connect with your loved ones. Now, that is mission dependent, right? A submariner obviously is not going to have as much contact with family as, say, someone on an aircraft carrier or someone on, an army base in Georgia somewhere, right? So definitely want to see what the parameters are and have a conversation with your loved one before you deploy. Okay, this is what the expectations are. This is what I want to do to stay in touch with you. Are we going to write? Are we going to text each other? It used to be where you would go into like a booth overseas and you would talk to your loved ones through the booth. I don't know if they do that anymore, but it definitely communication is key. A lot of units still have what are called family readiness groups and unit ombudsmen whose job it is to uh, make sure that the loved one at home is aware of what's going on with their spouse, so that way everybody's in the loop, right? So that's something that has to be impressed upon the service members. Like, you've got to understand what your resources are for communication. What is the parameter around a Red Cross message? If there's an emergency at home, who do we talk to? Who is the ombudsman? Who is the liaison? These are questions that have to be answered before the service member deploys. And the spouse at home has to come up with a strategy for passing the time. Are they working? Are they not working? Are they focusing on taking care of the kids? Are they volunteering? Are they volunteering for the unit? Are they going to school? So all those things should be discussed. And definitely, if they're not sure of how to arrange things, discussed in couples counseling or with the chaplain to kind of come up with a plan on how to communicate and how to maintain while the service members away.
Mhm.
So
Wonderful.
yeah.
So my last question is, and then you can add anything else you'd like, but I wanted to make
Mhm.
sure I got to this. What would you say are some of the, I guess, misconceptions about people who are deployed or the military in general? And I'm sure some of this, you can relate to personally, but we live in a world of a lack of insight and lack of knowledge a lot of times about people who are different from ourselves. So it could be racially based, it could be gender, any number of things. So are there misconceptions still about people in the military?
Oh yeah, there's plenty. I mean, we have this trope of someone having been active duty or even reservist of just being this like really straight laced, like, boots on too tight kind of person. And, while you're deployed or in the field, you're just completely mission focused all the time. And in reality, service members are just like civilians in that they love to have a good time, they love to have fun, they have friends. And deployed people get into all kinds of stuff. They'll set up little workout centers. They'll bring a skateboard and go skateboarding. They'll learn guitar. There's a guy, he's a Navy sailor. He goes by 2K Kenny, and he created a song called "I'm Underway." This guy, he's about as smooth as it gets. He's like a 2026 version of Sammy Davis Jr. Like, this kid can sing, and he's singing on the ships while deployed as a sailor, and it's just one of the coolest things ever. Here he is being a human being, being vulnerable, singing about how he misses being back home, and it's just, it's just apple pie. It's just beautiful that he just has this talent and he uses it on the ship. So understanding that sailors, soldiers, airmen, guardians, marines, coasties, whoever's out there, they're human beings just like everybody else. They miss their families. They go through hard times. They're not robots yet. So having respect for that, I think that goes a long way, and not treating them like aliens when they come home, because they want to take that uniform off and put their t-shirts and jeans on like everybody else, and giving them that space to do that and trying to be compassionate and human with them, I think goes a long way, right? The army, the military, the Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, these are all giant entities, right? There's millions of people serving in these spaces, right? But at the same time, we got to think about the individual too, and show love and compassion for these folks coming home, and letting them feel welcome, and breaking through that stigma. They're not robots. They're not. Most people in the military aren't even going to see direct combat. I think the number is about 10% will actually see direct combat. So that's not a big number. So everybody else is support. Everybody else is working to get the mission off the ground. So that's kind of what it is. It's like you got to treat them like human beings that they are, and allow for that conversation to happen, with a human perspective, right? Not asking them, oh, how many people did you see die? How many people did you kill? Um, you know, I could never be a service member. I would just slap the drill sergeant, or just stuff like that. It's just so like irksome. Well, how many guns did you get to shoot, and things like that. It's like no service member wants to hear that. Yes, these are all part of the job sometimes, but that is not the only thing that they're doing, right? A lot of the stuff that you do is just kind of like hurry up and wait. You're waiting for things to happen. You're dealing with toxic leadership. You're dealing with long work hours for very little pay. I mean, average service member probably makes, I want to say, somewhere in the lines of 40 to 50 grand a year. So it's not a job that pays a lot of money, but really what you get the most out of it is that feeling of supporting your country. And when you get out, you get a lot of benefits as far as VA loans and GI Bill. You get to go to college essentially for free, student loan repayments, and depending on the job, you can get really big bonuses. Like nukes, they can get $100,000 bonuses for re-upping because there's very little people who want to do it. EOD, bomb techs, same thing, 150K bonuses, and it's a dangerous job.
Oh,
So
and the thing is, you mentioned about the pay, and sometimes I think the most important jobs a lot of times in our society are the ones that don't pay very well. I mean, the people that get
absolutely,
paid very well, in a lot of cases, are entertainers and athletes. And
yeah.
then I think I mean, doctors get paid pretty well usually, but even there, you have people. If you took away the garbage men, if you took away the bus drivers, if you took away the bank tellers, I mean,
Might
there's so
even
many
exist.
people that if Tom Cruise can make $20 million a year, but if I never go see another Tom Cruise movie, it hasn't affected my life. But let the garbage men go on strike, or let a teacher have a teacher strike.
Oh yeah,
I mean, you can cripple an entire community. But what I wanted to say was, I think Hollywood, unfortunately, I mean, I love Hollywood in some ways, but
yeah.
the movies are about entertainment and action. So I think whenever I see a movie about the military, you're seeing people getting killed, things blowing up, extracting, people from a group of terrorists. So you never see that kind of normal, hey, let's go and have breakfast and take a walk and read a book. And you never see that because that would be boring. So I think, because I remember, you mentioned thing about the guns. And one time I was in Hawaii, I was doing this kind of career day for these kids. So I brought in somebody who was in the military, and he
Mm.
brought, a couple firearms, just to show in a case. And the first thing they wanted to know was all about the guns. Have you killed anybody? What kind of gun is that? That kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
think we really need to see more opportunities to just see, just like cops, to see them as human beings.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people I've met are cops, but I meet them out of uniform, and I'm not even thinking. I mean, they're just like me. As soon as they put the uniform on, all of a sudden I have this different
Hmm.
perspective because the uniform
Oh, yeah.
represents something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get it. It's just, I mean, one of my nursing professors, she explained it because she served during Vietnam. She was a corpsman, and she said, "Look, it's a job. You know, you got to pay bills." Back then, there was a draft. Now for women, no draft, but you got to pay bills. You want to support your community. It's a job, and at the end of the day, that uniform comes off. It goes in the laundry just like everybody else's clothes. I kept
Hmm.
the same 4 uniforms all 4 years I was in. Never got new ones, and it was a job. And once I discharged all my day uniforms, I gave away. I gave away all my boots. I gave everything away except for my Class A's, my dress uniform, which is in my closet over there.